reading.
You don't need an excuse. You can just go. We're in it. We do whatever we want. You know, I don't care what people think. Get up and go somewhere.
Well, it's having somewhere to go.
You know what? Find a coffee shop even if you don't drink coffee, because I don't drink coffee. And go and sit and drink. And, you know, when you see people, you don't have to be proud.
Well, there's a point.
I just do it. That's what I can just do it. You know? Just do it. What is this? Here you go, Ruth.
My daughter lives in St. Paul.
My daughter lives in St. Paul, Minnesota. And the other son lives in
So you go to Phoenix?
we haven't been.
Avery Gormans, Buttons, I think.
I like water.
David kept saying, I don't understand you guys. Why don't you move here? Or why don't you live here in the winter? His house for sale next door.
Isn't that nice that you want to do this?
Yeah, but I didn't want to live next door to him, number one. And number two,
And you're on call.
to another place and start another life. That's why you never know for the whole week.
It's another house set of housekeeping and this house and that house. I'm lazy. I wouldn't do it.
I like it here.
Good. It's good. You know, you be where you're happy.
We used to go in March. We used to, well, the kids were very young, we went all the time.
Well, I never see
See
you.
the bear.
You over in the middle here. That's all.
Toys, boys and toys.
What?
Boys have toys.
Yes, absolutely.
Right?
Thank you. Right.
They always do. No matter what, they're always boys with the toys. And he who dies with the most toys wins.
You think they're gonna go?
I guess it was just the opposite, that they, if you would have decided that we used to do a study and do it.
Yeah, that's what I heard too. I hope so.
Oh, what?
To move in here for Friday night service instead of the sanctuary.
Well, they used to say.
Yeah, welcome to the, hey, it's the world of Omicron. Come on.
They used the sanctuary because it's so much more room to spread out.
No, but I don't like it. I don't like it.
I don't either. This is intimate, it's, you're there.
Well, not only that, but the sound and the,
You know, what, I just remember when teaching, the teacher, there's a difference. My generation of school, when we were in school, teachers sat at the desk, and you were here. When I was teaching, we sat there. There's a culture, the intimacy is, they need to see you need to see them, you don't separate yourself from that, you're part of it. And I like that's what I like about the campus. A lot, well, I didn't either, but I'm talking about when I was, in the last century, when I was in school.
Oh, oh, yeah.
When I went to school, they sat on the desk sometimes, but always a separate, not like,
you know, they learn so much.
I had a teacher who never saw me.
sometimes they got up, but it was mostly, what did you teach? So we don't sit down and teach in elementary school.
Never. I was on the floor.
There's a glare. Sit over here. I don't have a problem.
There's a glare. There's a
And
glare.
that was 9 people.
They should put the curtains in.
My mother went
When I went to Shaker in the middle school, the junior high school was just
I get to see you twice.
7 and 8.
I didn't get to talk to you yet.
you went to Woodbury, which is Shaker Junior High. Was it called, it wasn't called Woodbury.
It was
Then it was 7, 8, and 9, because that means it was called Woodbury, Byron was built. It wasn't Woodbury until Byron was built.
no Byron and Downey had been built.
Okay, so that was 7, 8, and 9. You were,
I graduated in 72.
I graduated before you.
Yep.
It was 7, it didn't change, I was teaching in 72.
Untitled Chapter, but
Junior high was 7, 8, 9. Elementary school was K through 6, junior high was 8, but, we didn't have.
Was Conway, Woodbury, and I think the rest of the
Okay, so it was K through 6, 7 to 9, and 12. That's the elementary school, and the business school, and then I taught, which is when, in 7. At Lebanon,
at the high school
yes,
to teach.
and I taught here.
Mr. what's his name taught me?
I taught Lutheran, Mr. Barner taught me here. He was my teacher, and I taught Lutheran, the technical director of the theater program.
I was his assistant director. There was no one else.
That was me, I was technical director.
he just pulled in.
You were a student, assistant director, you were a student.
He'll be off the next.
I was
He
a
just pulled
student
in.
who did theater throughout my high school years.
Well, just don't remember. I was there until 1979. I was technical director, surgery.
What did technical work I did?
I did technical, I oversaw all the kids doing their work.
I did everything. I did private classes. I did the Ibsen plays when I was the assistant to
Okay, that was,
when we did Ibsen and we did that
and maybe that I started technical, okay, you graduated in 72? Okay, I was technical director in 72. And I didn't start technical until 71.
Good morning. Hello. Okay. Friends, I am going to make a point of really staying around here now, this session. I want you to know, I want everyone to know before we start, this is just an announcement that's irrelevant to what we're going to be talking about. That, first of all, thank you for being here. But beyond this, thank you. Our numbers are looking very bad. The infection rate is extremely high. We already have Omicron here in the area. The number of infections has been rising. There are no hospital beds. For those of you who are looking for tests, they're now difficult to find. I am asking that you please take every precaution possible. Please, I'm going to stay here, I'm going to stay far. I'm going to ask you to remain with your masks on, to please remember to keep a distance from each other, to please remember to wash your hands, to maintain all the safety precautions. We are looking at the possibility of Omicron becoming the dominant strain of this disease of COVID-19 by the end of the month or early next month. We see what has happened in other countries. If you are at risk or if you feel that you might be at risk, Please take this under advisement. We are at a point where our healthcare system is experiencing the kind of strain it has not experienced throughout the past 2 years of this pandemic. So I'm asking for everyone to pay special attention. Okay? I'm sorry? I'm sorry? Yeah, I mean, yes, we are at a critical time, and I'm going to ask everyone to be extremely careful. Remain with your masks on. Please be careful if you're going to have a cup of coffee or you're going to eat, make sure you are distanced, preferably, in the open, though it's cold outside. Please be very careful. We know that these moments are moments wherein those who are vaccinated are susceptible to being infected. So this is, though we believe that vaccinations help in terms of the severity of the disease, but please take every precaution necessary. Okay. So having said this, let's start. And let's start on our last session of 2021, which is really remarkable. We've had 29 sessions, or 30 sessions. This is the 30th session in 2021, which is lovely. It's wonderful that we've had this many sessions in 2021, and looking forward to 2022, and looking forward to us doing so in better health and in more safety, and looking forward to a better year, or a better secular year. But we're going to try to wrap up as much as we can about Ruth this year. And we really have what effectively is a double session this session. I don't know how far we're going to get, but we'll get as far as we can, and we'll continue next time round. Again, before I start, please remember, we will not have a session on the next weekend, which is the Christmas weekend, and we're going to give everyone time off, or on the New Year's weekend, which is the following weekend. So we're going to resume in the second weekend of January. Okay? Good. Okay. Well, those of you who are home, thank you for joining us. And here we go. So we're going to really rush through this. Okay. Let's review. Let's review for a moment. First of all, the Ruth Scroll, the Ruth story, which is written like a story. And as I said before, in many ways, the finest story of the Hebrew Bible, the scrolls of Ruth and of Esther. If Ruth is a comedy, Esther is in certain ways a tragedy. And we think about these, and we're going to talk about Esther later on. But it is a feminist story. It is a women's story. Women are at the center of the story. And it is a story of covenant, of being together and remaining together, of initiative, of hope, of return, and of, in certain ways, redemption. And I say certain ways because it's the notion of redemption here is complicated, and we're going to continue talking about redemption for many, many more weeks to come. And it's a story that occurs in the shadow of loss. And the loss doesn't go away. The pain of the loss doesn't go away. And it's a question of how we live with it. Which is, in other words, the shadow of the loss is a shadow that in certain ways, and only in certain ways, recedes in chapter 4. And this is something that we want to remind ourselves of right now as we continue talking about the story of Ruth. Then we learned that the language and the identity of the protagonists, we're going to talk about the identity of the figures today. They connect to the plot in other passages of the Hebrew Bible. In other words, we cannot think of the story of Ruth as some kind of an independent story that's just added in to the Hebrew Bible. It's tempting because it is such a magnificent literary unit. But it's deeply connected with other passages of the Hebrew Bible, as we saw. And finally, we saw this is a story about family. What it means to be a family, family solidarity, and the network of support that occurs in the context of family. And not only that, it is a story that promotes the family safety net. In other words, it promotes the notion of taking care of each other even beyond the immediate family, right? In other words, it's almost like a promotion of a particular kind of family-based welfare program or support program for others. It's the model, or if you like, the unit that allows for society as a whole, from the family to the extended family to the tribal unit to society to function. This story is almost a commercial for that family safety net, the extended family safety net, right? Look at what happens when we take care of each other. Look at what happens when we hang together. Look at what happens when in the face of odds we stick together, right? Which is remarkable. When we started talking about this last time in the context of the levirate marriage and so on and so forth, and what are we trying to do here? We're trying to build solidarity. Yes? Yeah? Okay? Which leaves us with a set of really important questions. The questions, if you like. We've talked about so much of this already, and the question of who are these people? What do we make of this? And especially, who is Ruth? What do we know about Ruth? What do we make of the character of Ruth? And what do we make of the character of Ruth, not just in terms of Ruth, but in the context of other people in the Hebrew Bible? What do we learn in the context of the story about Ruth? Ruth is the person after whom the whole thing is named, right? And a very complicated character in the sense that part of what we learn about her is passive, is from the perspective of other people. What do we know about Ruth? Who is this Ruth? What do we make of Ruth? What do we make of her status? What do we make of her agency? What do we make of the kind of person that she is? Now, again, there are the literary features of the story that help us here, right? And we are going to start talking about them. We're going to start figuring out what we make of Ruth and the story of Ruth in the context of other hints that we gather from other places. So let's start with that. Let's start with that. And we're talking about Ruth. We're talking about the person. We're talking about names, status. We're starting to try to figure out who this person is. Okay, let's see. Are we ready to go? A number of things we know about Ruth. First of all, chapter 2 of the Scroll of Ruth, the description of Boaz. Now, this is important for you to see both in the Hebrew and the English. And the key here is the notion of Ish, Gibor, of course, and Chayil, right? Ish, Chayil, right? Boaz is considered an Ish Gibor Chayil, right? It's a kinsman on her husband's side, of Naomi, Elimelech's side, right? From the family of Elimelech, a man of means and valor, I will translate it as. A man, a person of valor. He's known as Boaz. We haven't heard a thing about him. This is the beginning of chapter 2. This is when they're returning, to Bethlehem, Ruth and Naomi, and that's what we hear about Boaz. Already the author, the redactor of the story, tells us something remarkable about Boaz, right? He is someone for us to look up to. This is a man of valor. This is an important person of valor. Yes? Okay, why do I say this to us? Why is this important for us to see? Because when we go toward the end of the Scroll of Ruth, what do we see? Middle of chapter 3, towards the end of the Scroll of Ruth, Ruth is now sleeping at Boaz's feet. He wakes up startled, who is here, right? The redactor tells us, she replies, I am your maidservant, Ruth. We talked about this, maidservant, servant. He calls her daughter, right? And what does he say about her at that point? What does he say about her? Everyone you know, go to the gate of the town, everybody will tell you, Ki eshet chayil at. You are a woman of valor. Remember, Boaz was identified as a man of valor at the beginning of chapter 2. Now, toward the end of the story, in the middle of chapter 3, when we come to the, to the climax of the story and the preparation for Boaz's wedding with Ruth, he says, everyone knows you are a woman of valor. And remember, woman of valor and all the implications of woman of valor, Friday nights, traditional Jews sing the song of the woman of valor, right? From the Proverbs, Eshet Chayil Miyimtza, right? The woman of valor is this is significant. Yes? All right? So Boaz is a man of valor, and Ruth is a woman of valor. Boaz is known as a man of valor at the beginning of chapter 2. Ruth is known as a woman of valor by her actions by the time we come to the end of the story. Right? Now, this already tells us something about the character. Already tells us something. She has a reputation. Yes? And this already means something to us. But there are signs that things are more complicated than this. It's a little bit more challenging than this. What do we mean? What do we mean by this? Think about women, the status of women, where women are, and women as mothers. And think about women as mothers, and the status of women as mothers, and the status of women, especially in terms of naming their children in the Hebrew Bible, right? And in the Hebrew Bible, and there's a lot of scholarship on it, and for people who are interested, I'm happy to share some of the scholarship with you. But in the Hebrew Bible, many women name their children as mothers. As mothers. I'm saying this for a reason. Why do we talk about this? Remember, someone asked the question in the last session about Lot and the daughters of Lot. Do you remember that someone asked the question about the daughters of Lot and how the daughters of Lot taking initiative and sleeping with their father, the way Judah took initiative and hid her identity to fall pregnant with Tamar, with Judah, right? When we look at all of that, remember the stories here, and remember the naming and the status of these particular women, and we're going to think about this for a moment. Take a look at this. Genesis 19, the two daughters of Lot came to be pregnant by their father. Remember this? They said, there's no one left. Yes, for us. Our father is old. They got their father drunk, and the elder first and the younger the following evening, they became pregnant by him, and the older one bore a son and she named him, and what did she name him? Moab. And what is Ruth? She's a Moabite, right? You see how the stories are connected. We talked about the stories being connected. We said we would talk about this. But who names the son? The mother. The mother names the son Moab. And he's the father of the Moabites. And the younger also bore a son. And she also called him Ben Ami. She called him son of my people, who becomes the father of the nation Bnei Ammon, the Ammonites, right? But who names these children, right? The mother, right? And remember, there's an embarrassment here about the father, about who the father is and how the father came to be the father. But that's neither here nor there. It's the mother who names the children. Every time you hear about the mother naming the children, which is the standard, this is what most often happens, we're going to see what happens here and how the status of the mother is strengthened and reinforced in the act of naming, in part through, if you like, the absence or weakness of the father, right? And we're going to talk about that a little bit. We're going to start to try to unpack this a little bit, right? Because it's so significant for us. The daughter of Pharaoh. We're now, this week, reading the first Torah portion of the book of Exodus, right? This is Exodus chapter 2. This is within our Torah portion, so I must mention it, right? The daughter of Pharaoh saw this basket on the Nile, opened up, has her maidservant open the basket. They see a crying baby, a crying child. She takes pity on him. The story of the daughter of Pharaoh, the story of the daughters of Lot, is really important for us because of the connection of Moab and Ruth being a Moabite, which means that, again, we're looking at extended family. Lot is Abraham's nephew, right? So it's family, right? It's distant family, but it's family, right? There's a kind of an internationalist perspective here that's taking place in the story of Ruth the Moabite. These are not just complete strangers. They're kind of, if you like, you move across the extended family image and you extend it and extend it and extend it, you eventually reach the Moabites, right? So you think about this, they're related to Abraham. They're related to Abraham and Lot, right? The daughter of Pharaoh's story is also significant to us, and I'm going to come back to it later, in terms of what happens with Ruth and Naomi, right? Look at what happens here with Pharaoh, yes? And if you have a book, it's Exodus chapter 2, right? The daughter of Pharaoh, she takes pity on him, right? And she eventually gives the child to a nurse who happens to be the child's mother, according to the Hebrew Bible, right? The sister of Moses, yes? Miriam is looking over Moses and goes to the princess, to the daughter of Pharaoh, and says to her, would you like me to get you a wet nurse for that child? Would you like me to get you someone for the child? And she says yes, and she calls her mother, right? She calls her mother Yocheved. So you have Yocheved, you have the mother of Moses, feeding Moses. You must think about the human element of this story, right? The mother is now the nurse of that child who must give the child up after he's weaned. Think about this for a moment. She gives him up to the daughter of Pharaoh, and Pharaoh's daughter adopts him as her son. Now that he's no longer breastfeeding, now that he's no longer nursing, she is now his mother, right? She has saved his life, and she's now his mother. Now, think about this for a moment. And the status of motherhood, right? Among these women, yes? And she, the daughter of Pharaoh, not his biological mother, the daughter of Pharaoh, names him, right? And what does she name him? She names him Moses, because I min hamayim meshitihu, I drew him out of the water. Yes? You see what's happened here, right? It's a fascinating thing. She is now legally, her status has been elevated as his mother, the daughter of Pharaoh. She's now his mother, and hence now she names him. She gets to name him. You see what's happened here? Yes? The daughters of Lot with Moab, the daughter of Pharaoh, the princess, who becomes the mother of Moses legally, right? And who now names this child. Okay. A few more examples. We have to talk about this because I love this so much. The first announcement that is beyond the Hebrew Bible. The first announcement that is not just beyond the Hebrew Bible, beyond the 5 books of Moses, beyond the Torah, I should say. Not only the first announcement beyond the Torah, the 5 books of the Torah, the Pentateuch, but the first announcement chronologically of the Hebrew Bible. This is the earliest announcement text of the Hebrew Bible. The birth of Samson. What happens here with this woman, the wife of Manoach? She can't bear children, right? There's a problem. She is unable to bear children. And suddenly, and here's the story, an angel of God, a messenger of God, appears to the woman and says to her, "You are barren, have borne no children, but you shall conceive, you shall bear a son." Right? All the announcements, every announcement in the Hebrew Bible, in the Pentateuch, afterwards, is based on this. Everything. Yes, go ahead.
Ridiculous question. Why do the barren women only bear male children?
Oh, that's a really wonderful question that I will not answer right now. But it's a wonderful question that we can talk about, and if you like, we can talk about this. Great question. I really love that question. Great question. And we'll talk about this. The women who were barren did not only bear male children. Leah, at a certain point, becomes barren. God closes her womb in the book of Genesis, and when she starts bearing children, she also gives birth to Dinah, a daughter. But it's a wonderful question. In all the high-profile cases, who are the children who are born, right? Which tells you something, right? The way I'm phrasing that comment tells you something, right? So we have to talk about this. It's a great, wonderful question, right? You're barren, you have borne no children. I recognize that you are barren. You have borne no children, right? Which in the Hebrew, I add this translation, in the Hebrew it says, you are barren. You have borne no children. We don't speak about your husband. You are barren. You have borne no children. Yes? Okay. You will bear a child. Yes? Okay. You will bear a child. The angel comes. Manoach, eventually, the husband, meets the angel, speaks to the angel. You know, the angel won't take any food or drink. The angel goes away. And you shall conceive and bear a son. The boy is to be a Nazirite, and she bears the son and calls him Samson. Now here is really another element to this that I want to add to the mix. A man and a woman cannot always bear children together. They cannot always have children together. A man and a woman will sometimes in our Hebrew Bible have trouble bringing children to the world. And they need the help of God. There is another party that is added to the mix. And somehow, here, miraculously, a child is born. Because there is an issue here with the man or the woman. There is some kind of an issue that prevents a couple from bringing a child to the world. Right? In other words, what you have here is yet another trope, yet another model of childbearing, in the context of which it's the mother who names the child. Yes? The mother and the father couldn't do this alone. Something had to happen. There had to be an intervention. Right? This is the biblical version of IVF. Right? This is the intervention. Right? There had to be something else going on here for this child to be born. And the son is then going to be a Nazirite, and so on and so forth. And that's, again, so you see how influential this becomes, right? And the fact that it is the mother now who names that son, right? And who names the son after son with an O, after the son with a U, right? Shimshon from Shemesh, from sun, right? With a U in any event, and the son is touched by the Spirit of God. Okay, yes? Are we together? So far, so good? Look at these models of women naming their children. And bear with me because I have to bring in Isaiah. I have to bring in Isaiah because, of course, the story of Samson, the story of the announcement of Samson, the very first, becomes the model for the announcement of the birth of Jesus, the birth for the Christians of the Christ, right? This is, all of this is the, so I have to bring in yet this other example, Isaiah chapter 7, Ahaz, the prophecy of Isaiah to King Ahaz, who is worried about the Assyrians and the Aramites from the north coming over and running over his country. And Isaiah says, Lo takum velo tihye, it won't happen. This is not what's going to happen. And further, I'm going to tell you something else. You don't trust God, but the maiden shall bear a child. The young woman shall bear a child. The teenager shall bear a child. She will give birth to a child. And though the script in Hebrew is unclear, everybody knows to read this as she will name him Karat. There's a taf there in the Hebrew, but she will name him Emmanuel, right? She will name that child Emmanuel, which is the reason the name Emmanuel is so important within Christianity. But she will name that child Emmanuel. The Christians read this as a prefiguration, as a prophecy that would lead to the birth of the Christ, right? This is what they see. Let me just say, we're less than convinced that this is what Isaiah meant, but this is the way they read this. Okay, but again, who will name the child? The maiden. Where's the father of the child? There's no father. Okay, but you see the issue, you see what's going on here. You see how significant motherhood here is, and the notion of the mother and the status of the mother here, including the young mother, being elevated through the naming of the child, the birth and the naming of the child, which are effectively one unit. The birth of the child and the naming of the child. By the way, what's missing? What's missing from all of this? Anyone? What's missing from all of this? Labor, being pregnant, then going through the pregnancy, living through the pregnancy, then the labor, then the giving birth, and then the naming of the child. Is there anything missing here in this cycle that we know, the natural cycle of giving birth and bringing to the world children? Anything that you see missing here? Anything unusual about all of these descriptions? Anything that you might want to add? No circumcision. Thank you, Mel. No circumcision. Where is circumcision? No circumcision, right? It teaches you something, right? Okay, we one day we'll talk about this. But no circumcision, right? Okay, so in other words, no ceremony of naming that occurs in the context of the 8th day. We don't see any evidence of it for the time being, right? Okay, so, but we will leave that to the side. Thank you for mentioning it. Good. I have to mention just a couple of additional examples, and then we'll move forward and we'll talk about Ruth and what is happening with Ruth. And we'll come back to the story of Ruth. This is the story of naming. Yes, go ahead, Roman. Right, that's right. Yes, yes. These are, again, so wonderful question. Roman is asking the question where in chapter 3, Boaz is pleading with Ruth to stick with him. Actually, it starts in chapter 2. Toward the end of chapter 2, Boaz is pleading with Ruth to stay at his field, not to go to other fields, and to stick with his girls. Again, na'arot, right? To stick with his girls, na'arot in Hebrew, and to collect grain from Boaz's own fields. Again, what are we emphasizing here? What is the emphasis here? Thank you for asking the question, Roman. What is the emphasis here? The emphasis is on social responsibility, on that support network. Stay with my girls, stay with my kin folk, with the people whom I support, whom my field supports. You are now one of ours. You're part of the mishpocha, you're part of the extended family. Stay with us. You will glean the fields with us, right? Okay. I have to mention this, I just have to, because there is a lilt to all of this. We talked about Lot and the daughters of Lot, wherein the role of the father is something that we're less than comfortable with. We spoke about Pharaoh's daughter, and the adoption of Moses and her naming Moses. We spoke about Manoach and the inability of Manoach and his wife to bear a child and the need for God's help. We spoke about the maiden, right, in Isaiah, where there's no father, right? But Leah and Jacob are married. And Jacob is a strong figure. And they're legitimately married. But even though they're married, what happens when Leah conceives and has a full pregnancy and bears children and brings children to the world? What happens when she brings her first son to the world? What does she say? Reuven. What does Reuven see? Behold, see, witness, I have brought over a child. God has seen my affliction. God has seen my loneliness. I'm alone in this marriage. My husband doesn't love me. He loves my sister. Right? And she names the child Reuven. Right? And the same goes for Simeon. Right? God has heard my plea. Shimon. Right? From to hear. Right? And the same goes finally with Judah, who is the child who is the first person in the Hebrew Bible to be named as an act of gratitude. Leah becomes the first woman and the first person in the Hebrew Bible to thank God. The first person to express gratitude to God in the Hebrew Bible is Leah, our mother Leah, right? Now take a look at what happens next. So again, think about this for a moment, right? This is an organized marriage. There is Jacob, there is Leah. Jacob is a very strong figure, a dominant figure. Who names the children? Leah. All of these children are named by Leah, right? And then there's Rachel. Now, here comes the lilt. Jacob set out from Bethel. Why did they set out from Bethel with Rachel being so close to delivering, to giving birth? I don't know. But, okay, they set out from Bethel. They are in Bethel, and they are moving from Bethel to Ephrat. And what happens? Rachel starts to give birth. And she has complications. And she's having a very hard time. And at its hardest, the midwife says to her, "Have no fear, it's another boy for you," and she dies when giving birth. And she, before she dies, the last thing she does before she dies is to name the child. And she names him Ben-Oni. She gives him a name. She says, Ben-Oni. It's not that she doesn't name him. She does name him. She calls him Ben-Oni. But his father calls him Benjamin. So the mother named him and died, and Jacob now overruled her. Called him Benjamin. Now, how do we know him? We know him as Benjamin, right? Okay, now this is an example of one of those stories that we need to be thinking about, because that, here we should have red flags waving. This is where the red light bulbs should be flashing in our brains. We should be thinking, what is going on here? It's not that his mother didn't give him a name. Here, these mothers are giving names to these children 23 times in the Hebrew Bible. What is this? She named him before she died. We're not going to talk about this now. I'm just pointing it out. I'm just saying this is an example of one of those moments of real tension in the story. Okay. And she's buried, in what is today Bethlehem, right on the outskirts of Bethlehem. Back to Ruth. Now go to chapter 4 of the Scroll of Ruth. What page are we on? Does anyone know what page we're on? What page are we? 1423. We're on page 1423. Thank you. So now the process is completed. The Redeemer, who was a closer kinsman to Naomi, has given up on the right, has waived the right to take over the field and to support Naomi and Ruth as their Redeemer. So it falls upon Boaz, and Boaz says, I will do it. I will now redeem Naomi and take over all the property, purchase all the property, take over the property, and support Naomi and take Ruth in order to sustain the name of her departed husband, right? And he takes her as a wife, and God let her conceive, thank you, and she bears a son to Boaz. Is it not clear who bears the child? Does anyone have any questions about who bears the child? No. It seems pretty clear. Am I right? Yes? Ruth is married to Boaz. She's with Boaz. She becomes pregnant and she bears a child. And the women, who are the women? I don't know. There are women. The women speak to Naomi, and they say to Naomi, blessed be God who has not withheld a redeemer from you today. Who just gave birth? It's a big deal. It's a big deal. They say to Naomi, God has not withheld a redeemer from you today. May his name be perpetuated in it. Let him renew your life and sustain you. For he is born of your daughter-in-law. What, is she an incubator? What do you mean, born of your daughter-in-law? This is your daughter-in-law's son. What are they saying? Right? How do we see Ruth here and Ruth's status and what is happening with Ruth through these statements? Think about this for a moment. He is better for you, Naomi. She's better for you. Ruth is better for you than 7 sons. Wait a minute. She's not your servant. Remember the story of Sarah and Hagar? Right? We're back to the story of Sarah and Hagar, which I don't have the time to go back to, but we're back to that story, to that model. What is happening here is Ruth seems to be bearing a child for Naomi. Yes.
Because this child will carry on that family name. It's not just Ruth's husband, it's Elimelech as well. I mean, it's the family name.
It is the family name. You're absolutely right. So, Ellen, thank you. And Ellen says this is the family name. This child will be bearing the family name. Boaz is the redeemer on behalf of the family, and therefore, wait a minute, but it's clear that Boaz is marrying Ruth because of her departed husband. It's Ruth's son, and it's also the legacy now of Ruth. because of her departed husband, because of the husband whom she whom she had lost. Why just Naomi? It was Ruth who just gave birth. Ruth is there, right? Having just given birth, right? So I want to point this out. Yes.
What does Redeemer mean?
Well, the word in Hebrew is goel, right? And Redeemer here means protector, caretaker, protector, sustainer, and the person who assures our future, right? And we have to ask ourselves, Ruth a moment ago was an Eshet Chayil, was a woman of valor. A moment ago, in the last chapter, she was a woman of valor, right? And Boaz said, I will marry you because everybody knows you're a woman of valor. I will be happy to take you as my wife. You know. Everybody knows. Ask at the gate of the city. Everybody at the gate of the city knows you're a woman. What happened here? What is this? It's all about Naomi, right? The women and Naomi. Naomi has found her group of women whom she knew. They're all together, right? And here they're congratulating her. And where's Ruth? Do you see do you see the drama of the story? Yes? Does everyone understand what I'm saying? It gets worse. Naomi took the child. Naomi took the child and held it to her bosom, and she became its nurse, as it were, omenet, foster mother. Wait a minute. What about Ruth? Remember I talked about the story of Pharaoh's daughter and Yocheved, the mother of Moses, the biological mother of Moses? And the biological mother of Moses became the nurse. And the daughter of Pharaoh became the mother, the adoptive mother of this child. Remember? We talked about this. And remember, we talked about this as a model. Look at what happened here. The mother of the child is in a way set aside, with the nurse having to give up this child, the nurse who had been the biological mother of Moses, having to give up the child for the daughter of Pharaoh, for the princess, the daughter of Pharaoh, who then names the child, right? And here, this mother who's just given birth, who normally would be perfectly capable of feeding and nursing the child and raising the child, right? We don't know otherwise. Has her child taken away from her by Naomi, who becomes the nurse of the child and the foster mother, the omenet of the child. Right? Look at what just happened here. Now comes the really interesting piece. The women gave him a name. Do we know in the Hebrew Bible of other examples of other people but the parents and God giving names to people? I'm sorry? Well, Moses, thank you, Deborah. Moses, but Moses, the name is only given by the adoptive mother once she is the adopted mother. The adoptive mother. In other words, she's recognized, her status is that of a mother. She's now, it says, you look it up, in the Social Security, it says she's the mother, right? This is what it says, this is, right by the Social Security number. So we know she's the mother, right? In other words, there's a formal status change that occurs, right? Before she names the child. Nowhere else in the Hebrew Bible. There is not a single place in the Hebrew Bible where we read that the women, other people, give the child a name. Nowhere else. Nowhere else. Are you telling me that Ruth didn't want to name her child? What is going on here? Right? Remember, we speak about a story of redemption. And remember that in the way the story is constructed, and I started out with this, if this is a comedy, then the story of Esther is in certain ways a tragedy, right? But not completely. Not completely. Take a look at what's just happened here. We must be able to read the story. Right? What happened to this mother? The mother is sidelined. I mean, we have to... What is going on? Now, we know that she loves Naomi. We know that she's connected with Naomi. We know that she stayed with Naomi, and the whole idea was that she would come back home with Naomi. We know all of that. The women are giving him a name? The child is taken away? What is this? What, we're not going to celebrate Ruth, the Eshet Chayil, this woman of valor? What just happened here? How do we explain this? Right? These are the elements we rarely notice when we read the story of Ruth. But that's why we read carefully. That's why we look at these texts and we read them carefully. You see what happened here? What could be more important? What could be more significant? Right? They named him Oved. We know him as the name. We know him as Oved. And he becomes, the great-grandfather of King David. Very nice. Something interesting is happening here. Yes, Marie? Well, wait a minute, Marie. Marie's asking, why does the mother or the father or God or the neighbors, why are they giving a name? There's no explanation as to the process of naming the child or who gets to name the child. Is it not the case to this very day, the parents name a child? No? No, so the question is, are we not going to find out why the neighbors, why these women named the child? The answer is no. There is no explanation. There is absolutely no explanation, right? This is maybe a demonstration of what is the English, and I am taking things completely out of context. It's completely extemporaneous, but what the English phrase is, it takes a village, right? This may be an explanation or some kind of a demonstration of the strength of the greater community, the strength of the support network of Naomi, the strength of the bond between Naomi and Ruth. Where is Ruth? Could Ruth's name not have been added here? Could we not have recognized Ruth as the mother of this child? What, she gave birth to this child and that's it? Right? In other words, no, there is no explanation. Marie, you're asking the right question. There's no explanation, right? And it's the only case in the Hebrew Bible. We don't see other cases like this. There's something unique about this, right? Okay, Deborah, and then I'm going to move. Yeah. So Deborah is asking, in the same way that Boaz accepted Naomi to glean from his fields, is there any sense of Naomi kind of having agency and status in a way that would offer her a special, not only status, but a familial role in the context of the rearing of this child? Right? Did maybe Ruth offer that? Did Ruth offer that role to Naomi? Is the question. Maybe. It doesn't say so. You know, if I had to put myself in the shoes of Boaz, you know, the only thing I would really want is to take a moment and to be together and to support Ruth and that baby after that baby is born. The last thing I would want is to give that baby away. I can't imagine a mother wanting to just give the baby away after the child is born for someone else to raise him and for someone else to name him. It's unheard of, right? I mean, sometimes the names are divinely inspired. But who does that? Right? I mean, it's without precedent, and by the way, without parallel in the Hebrew Bible. Which, you see how important the issue of childbearing, motherhood, naming, all of that is, and how much it tells us. And what happens here in the story? What happened? What happened? I want to leave you with a thought, and then I'm going to really leave you, and I don't know how far we're going to get with this, but I'm going to leave you with this thought. In the Hebrew Bible, there are a few examples of names changing. Names being altered. You know, and we can talk about this a great deal more, but Abram becomes Abraham, right? This is after so much has happened. Chapter 12 is Lech Lecha. We're already in chapter 17. And Abram has demonstrated faith in God, and God says, your name shall no longer be Abram, but Abraham. Your name has changed. Your name is going to change, right? Why has it changed? Your name is changing in the context of a new identity. You are going to now be the father of many nations. You're going to be the patriarch of so many. So many are going to look up to you, right? Your entire identity and your name are changing. What has been your identity thus far? Of a person who's had no children, right? And everything is going to change for you, right? Fatherhood, paternity is going to make this enormous change to you, right? Jacob fights with this man/angel, right? And in the morning, the man says, let me go. And what does the angel say to Jacob? Your name will not be Jacob, your name will be Israel. The name here changes, right? Why does it change? You are able to hold your own with divinity. You're able to muster the divine, the divine spirit and the divine protection, and to deal with human beings. You will make it. You will survive. Your name is now changing. Your identity is changing, right? There are other examples of this. I will only mention one example. Moses flees from Egypt after he kills an Egyptian. Remember? He goes to the desert. There are the Midianites, right? The daughters of the priest of Midian, who is not named, and their father is called Reuel, right? This is actually the grandfather, but never mind. There is the name Reuel here in chapter 2 of the book of Exodus. Have you come back? He says to the girls, why did you come, to the daughters with the young women, why did you come back so quickly today? They say that this Egyptian man rescued us from the shepherds who wouldn't let the flocks drink. Where is he? Moses receives the daughter Tzipporah as his wife, right? She bears a son, and who names him? Moses names the son Gershom because my experience is that I'm a stranger in a strange land. I'm in the desert, right? How is he known? He's known as an Egyptian. He's still an Egyptian who rescued these Midianite women, the daughters of the priest, and their flocks, right? What do we learn later, right? In Exodus chapter 3, right after that, how is the priest named? Moses' father-in-law, how is he named? He is named Jethro. Moses was tending to the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, right? Do we have any doubt as to the name of the father-in-law? No, the father-in-law is Jethro. But, go to Numbers chapter 10, verse 29, right? Numbers chapter 10, verse 29. Jethro is now with the Israelites. They're at Mount Sinai. They're preparing to go through the desert and make their trek to the Holy Land. And how is he called? Chovav, son of Reuel. Reuel, the very same name that occurred in Exodus chapter 2. Reuel here is in Numbers chapter 10, but the name is Chovav, right? Jethro has another name. The name now is Chovav, right? And it says very clearly, Chovav, Moses' father-in-law, so that we should make no mistake. The name Reuel appears there, Chovav, father-in-law. We know exactly whom the Hebrew Bible is talking about. In the book of Exodus, he was called Jethro. Now he's called Chovav. What happened? What happened? What, his name just changed? What happened? I'm going to summarize this for you, and the summary is Rashi on Numbers 10. Chovav is identical with Jethro. It is the same person as Jethro. As it is said, father-in-law of Moses, he was called by several names. Jethro, Yitro, from Yod Taf Resh in Hebrew, adding to, in having some kind of addition, because through him a section was added to the Torah, the section that is named after Yitro, not the whole Torah portion, but a section was added after Yitro, and Chovav after he loved the Torah. In other words, he had a religious conversion. And after his religious conversion, he was named Chovav, and there's a rabbinic tradition that explains how come he's had this new name, Chovav, because of a religious conversion, because something happened here religiously for Jethro, right? Abraham had a religious conversion. Jacob had a religious conversion. Jethro had a religious conversion. All of these people had religious conversions. Their names changed, right? Ruth chapter 4, the very end of the scroll of Ruth. 5 times in the scroll of Ruth, Ruth is known as Ruth the Moabite. Her name never changes, nor does her title Moabite. Ruth the stranger, Ruth the Moabite. Here, Boaz declared that he was going to be the redeemer of the entire family. He declared that he was going to be the person taking care of everybody, that he was going to be marrying Ruth. Could no one have said, welcome Ruth to the tribe of Judah? Welcome Ruth to the Hebrew nation? Welcome Ruth to the people of Bethlehem? Right? No. Boaz himself says, I'm also acquiring Ruth the Moabite. I am marrying not Ruth, I am marrying Ruth the Moabite. Jethro the Midianite. Ruth the Moabite. Right? Ruth remains Ruth the Moabite to the very end. She never becomes fully part of the Hebrew and Judean identity or the identity of the people of Bethlehem. So we talk about the story, and we talk about the shades of the story, and we talk about the strength of the story, And we talk about belonging, and here we're talking about that element that wherein she doesn't quite belong. Why? The great-grandmother of King David. Why? Why? Right? So remember this, and remember that at the very beginning, right? And they say to her, the people, the elders, respond to Boaz saying, wait a minute, let your house be like the house, but let her be like Rachel and Leah, both of whom built houses for Israel. They're saying, wait, they're reacting to Boaz, who says, Ruth the Moabite. They say, let her be like Rachel and Leah, right? May your house be like the house of Peretz, whom Tamar bore to Judah, right? Is what they're saying. Remember, we spoke about the story of Judah and Tamar last time and how important it is, right? They're reacting to Boaz, but for Boaz, she's Ruth the Moabite. For us, she remains Ruth the Moabite. And she was Ruth the Moabite from the very beginning. Chapter 1 of the story of Ruth. The very beginning, we're introduced to Ruth, and what does it say? Naomi returns from Moab with her daughter-in-law, Ruth the Moabite. The beginning of the story starts with Ruth the Moabite. The end of the story ends with Ruth the Moabite. She never changes. She remains Ruth the Moabite. 5 times in the scroll of Ruth, she's Ruth the Moabite. She doesn't get to name her child. The child is taken by Naomi, and the women around name him Oved. So, it's a fascinating and complicated story, right? It's an amazing story. Yes, Helga.
Was this significant, or was it just circumstantial?
Is it significant or is it circumstantial? That is it purposeful, right? Or is it a flourish or some kind of a literary artifact? Our tradition teaches us, it's a wonderful question. Thank you for asking the question, Helga. Our tradition teaches us that nothing is accidental. By the time we come to texts that are written and rewritten and redacted and re-redacted and canonized, they have gone through so many iterations that nothing here is accidental. Everything has meaning, right? Now, how was it originally? Originally, could it have been accidental, or could it have been just a way of writing or of expressing oneself? Sure. But the Moabites have meaning in our tradition. Remember, we studied this a number of weeks back. An Ammonite and a Moabite should not come within the congregation of God, right? We learned about these things in the book of Deuteronomy. Moabites have a history with us. We know what Moabites are and who they are. And when we mention these things, they're important. They have meaning. So it's a wonderful question. And we, in the way we read this, don't take this to just be accidental. Yes, Jimena.
So, did the women, kind of on behalf of Naomi, name Ruth's child because they didn't want this child to be a Moab?
Well, that's a really interesting question. The question is, did the women name the child of Ruth on behalf of Naomi out of concern that the child might be regarded as a Moabite? that we might think of the child as a Moabite, that he would be a Moabite, right? The children of Moses, by this logic, would be Midianites, because Zipporah was the daughter of a Midianite priest, right? By this logic, the children of Moses would be Midianites, but the children of Moses are not Midianites, right? Rachel and Leah, right, are Aramites. Jacob went to, right, Laban the Aramite, and Laban the Aramite gave his daughters to Jacob. So the daughters of Laban are Aramites. By this logic, the children of Jacob and Leah and Rachel are Aramites, right? It's very difficult for us to say. And it's also very difficult for us to understand who gave them the right to name this child to begin with. Naomi might have named the child, but Naomi didn't. Not here. Not here. I'm going to leave you with my last thought, and then I'm going to wish you a happy end to 2021 and a happy 2022, and hopefully a safe and healthy 2022. Maybe the redactor of this text wanted to make the point that Ruth didn't convert, that Ruth remained Ruth, and that Ruth remained a Moabite, and that it's okay. She is still the great-grandmother of David. And had it not been for Ruth, we wouldn't have had a David. There would be no David. Maybe the fact that she remains Ruth the Moabite from the beginning of the story, chapter 1, to chapter 4, to the very end, is part of the point of the story. Right? And maybe her being sidelined as a mother and as the person naming that child is an element that is added to the story, or that is included in the story, in order to generate the questions that we are raising today. In order to lead us to say, you know, we might do better. There might be a better way of doing this. After all, Ruth the Moabite, not the Moabite, she's the mother of this child. We're going to continue talking about this, but we're only going to continue talking about this in 2022. I wish you all a wonderful new year, and I thank you at home for joining me. It's wonderful to see you again. Thank you for coming in for this. And I look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks. Keep safe. Bye-bye.